Hi everybody, hope everybody's doing well. Since I've semi-retired, I've been spending a lot of time block printing. I was talking to Saranya about it and she suggested that I post a couple of videos to show the process. So this is one of my latest images. It's of the Rio Pecos here in New Mexico near Fort Sumner, where the river kind of comes around a bend. And this is the block that I used. This is a piece of linoleum. So I'm doing Linocut blocks. You can buy this linoleum in various sizes from any supplier. Any art supplier will have them. You can see that I've carved into the block, and then the raised areas are what has put the ink on the paper. So I thought I would post a few videos for you. Today I thought I would talk about how to get your image onto the linoleum before you start carving. I have a few round pieces. We've been doing these round block prints using a tortilla press, which is an idea that we stole from a group of artists in Guadalajara, but we've also been exchanging blocks with them. So we're printing their blocks here and they're printing our blocks there. It's great fun. So my friend Michelle sent me this picture of this grasshopper. I thought he was a pretty compelling fellow. Thought it would be nice to put him on one of these rounds. Looks kind of like we're looking at him through a microscope or something. So in order to get this image on here, the process that I used is I took this image and I took a piece of tracing paper. You can buy this also at any art store. I put it down on top of the image and traced around the key characteristics that I wanted to show. What I use when I do this is this is just painter's tape, and it's extremely handy from an artwork perspective because you can peel it off without damaging the photographs or tearing the paper. So once I had everything traced on that I wanted to show, then I took this tracing paper backwards. I just turned it over and put it on the linoleum. In between, I sandwiched a piece of carbon paper. So this is what we used to use back in the day of typewriters. If you're old enough to know about typewriters, you're old enough to know that we used to use this stuff for making duplicates when we would type. So you can buy this at Staples. It's called carbon paper. You can get it in multiple colors. The black is pretty effective for this linoleum transfer. So I would just put this down, carbon side down, tape this on, and then trace over the areas that I wanted to carve out. It's important to note that if you, I noticed that I turned it over so that the image, he's looking this direction. And on my block, he's looking this direction. That's because when I print it, it's going to come out just the opposite. So if you were to put lettering on here, for example, if you were to write something on here, it would print backwards. So if you're going to do lettering or you're going to do anything that, you want to look in a specific direction, remember that it's backwards. You'd have to put the lettering on backwards so that when you print it, it comes out forward. So now that I've got it drawn, we'll go ahead with the carving. Okay, now in order to carve this block, you need a couple of things. You need a tool. This is one of the most inexpensive versions of this tool. This is the handle. Inside of it are a number of different cutting heads. This one you can see is maybe you can see it. It's a very small V shape cut. Maybe I can get it to focus. There it is. Very small V. This one is a very large V for deeper cuts. I actually haven't used this one very much. And this one is a wide U, which is typically used for clearing out large areas of material. So I used both the small and the large U. The small V and the large U, I used them on this block for the Pecos. The small areas, you can see the detailed areas where I might have had some very narrow cuts, I use the small V. The larger areas, like where the sky was, is where I use the U. You're going to get texture in the background. If you want to clear out a large area, you're going to end up with texture in the background. You just need to be aware of that and take advantage of it when you do your carving. So to get this thing in the handle, it's just a little pretty simple holder. You unscrew it, stick the one in that you want, and tighten it. It's really easy to, when you're pushing on it, if you put a lot of force, to like suddenly lose control and cut all the way across your block. It's also not a good idea to cut toward yourself for obvious reasons. Safety first, friends. So one of the things that I have here is, it's also by Speedball. I don't know, they're just really common. This is a little, you can use it as an inking plate. It's also for carving. It has a lip that just sort of fits over the edge of the table. I can show you how it fits on there. So that if I want to, I can push against something that isn't toward my hand or my body. Part of what's going to make a difference when you start carving is going to be the way you hold your tool. If you push hard from the back, like I said, you can lose control and just kind of slide off. I have a tendency to, especially when there's detailed areas, I'll use it almost like a pencil. And I keep a finger on top so that if I start to carve away on it, I have a little bit of control. And I try not to take too much material out at once. So from a strategy standpoint, if I look at this picture, I can see that the grasshopper is lighter than the leaf behind it. I'm really contemplating doing this in two colors. I would think I would want to do a green for the background, and then maybe a yellowish tan for the rest of the detail on the grasshopper. I'm not exactly sure yet, but I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and carve this block, starting with carving out the body of the grasshopper. I want to leave some details in, like I want to leave the edge of this antenna in over his eye so that it prints and it reads well as an antenna. So I'm just going to get started. I'll probably stop the video so that I don't like bore you, but just to show you the technique. And by the way, if you can put this in the sun for a little bit, it warms it up. You can even put them in the oven for a little bit. I wouldn't put it in on very high because I don't want, it could be toxic. So the softer it is, the easier it is to cut. You can also get some other materials that aren't linoleum if you want to start off. There are things called Easy Cut, I think it's called, or Easy Carve. There are sort of almost spongy kind of materials. This is something that my friend Lisa did. It is sort of rubbery, and she's carved an owl into it. With a lot of little detail pieces. It's really kind of nice when it prints, but you can see it's spongy. So that's an option too. The linoleum releases the ink very nicely. So and it's consistent in thickness so that I know it's easier for me to just know how to print it. So enough talking. I'm going to do a little bit here of carving and I'll get back to you. Watching the edge where I'm carving. It's really as simple as that. It's a very small piece that came out. I tend to do this on a piece of plexiglass underneath so that I can just wipe it off to the side, and then I can pick up the plexiglass later and dump it into the trash because I'll end up with a lot. Again, just trying to stay within my lines. I want to clear all of this arm area out And if I have any texture, I want the texture to go the length of the arm of this grasshopper. It's also okay, if you aren't sure, to run a test print and do an intermediate print to see if you want to clear more material out. I'm going to stop and I'll pick up back with you as I get further along. Okay, well, I've carved quite a bit on this. I do note that it helps me to have a local light so that I can see the contours better as I'm carving it. When you carve, you might think to yourself that it's best too little than too much, because it's easier to take more material away than it is to add material back, of course. So I have a lot of texture inside of some spaces on this grasshopper that I might want to clear out a little bit, because, you know, I've carved away the areas that are going to remain white, like the color of the paper. So when you carve it away, when you carve these areas away, that should be what does not print. What prints is the flat part that remains. So I've used the small tip for almost all of this carving. I'm taking the large tip now, and I'm going to go ahead and just take a little bit of this texture out, real shallow, just because I want to make sure that it stays pretty white right here in the front on this little guy's face. And I use a brush because sometimes things get stuck in there. So I want to make sure that I don't have unwanted textures showing up. And you can see it's easy to cut kind of deep. That's not really my intention here. I just want to take a nice wide swath of thin material off. I've left quite a few spots for lines. So you can see around the antenna and around the eye, I've left lines. I've left lines on the body. I don't really mind if some of this texture ends up showing up. I just kind of wanted to get it off of his nose a little bit. So again, it's easier to take more away than it is to add it back. I have used putty, wood putty on wood block cuts, which works on wood blocks. I haven't tried it on linoleum. I don't know that wood putty would do a good job. The deeper you carve, the less likely you're going to have ink on it when you print. So I've left the whole background. When I print this, whatever color I print it, it's going to be completely dark in the background. This area of the leaf is going to be white with veining in it, dark veining in it, and the grasshopper itself should be white with lines around it. I see I've missed some areas. I'll probably pick those up, cut those out a little bit before showing you how to print. There are some nice textures on the side of this grasshopper's legs, back legs, which we don't really see as back feet. You know, they point backwards when they land. So I tried to put these lines on the side, and I also tried to show a little bit of shading here. So here are the lines on the side of the leg, and here is the shading behind the leg. We'll see if it comes out. So next we'll be printing. I'll show you how the print actually works. I don't have a press. I don't have the tortilla press, and I don't have a press. I'm going to show you two different ways of printing, but we'll get to that as soon as I clean this out. So see you in a bit. Okay, I think we're ready to print this plate. I've already run a couple of prints on it. I didn't make a very good video, so I'm going to try to do a little bit better this time. The nice thing about the ink that I'm using is that you can clean it up with a baby wipe. It is oil-based ink, so it doesn't dry up really fast, but it is what they call water miscible. This is Speedball Professional Relief ink. This is relief printing. It's super graphic black. I'm using this to proof the plate. Proof is just to see how it prints initially. So I'll kind of walk you through the process. This is like a petty knife that you would use for spackling your house or the wall or something. You just put the ink out and make sure that it's nice and even and pliable and you don't have any cat hairs in it or anything. That happens a lot around here. So I have two areas that I use when I ink up a plate. The first area that I roll is to even out the ink. The second area, just to get it evenly distributed. The second one is to get the texture I want before I put it on the plate. So this might be a little too much. You can kind of hear that. If I think of this as coarse sandpaper, then this area is the fine sandpaper. And it makes it nice and smooth and silky. You don't want to put too much ink on the plate because you'll start to fill up the little crevices with ink and you'll lose some of the detail. At the same time, you want to have the black areas black. So you just roll it on the plate. I'm using a piece of plexiglass here because it makes it easy to clean up. So that's a good tip. So I'm going to put a few layers on here until somebody said, well, how do I know enough? I've rolled it enough. I have enough ink on there. And someone else said, you roll it until your ancestors tell you to stop. So I don't know if my ancestors are speaking to me, but I'll say that that's good. So now to print it, there are two methods I'm going to show you. The first one is with a spoon. I'm going to take you with me over here to my target. Hopefully you can see that okay. Let me check. So in order to register the paper, and I'm not really doing multiple colors, so I don't have to register carefully, but I do want this to be in the center of the paper that I'm putting down. So I made this little target. It is the paper, a lot of the things that we're doing lately are 8 by 8 paper, and this is a 4-inch diameter piece of linoleum. By the way, my friend cut it with a laser cutter. It didn't come in a round stock like that. So if you're good with a utility knife, or if you have a laser cutter, you can make yours round too. But there's nothing wrong with using rectangular plates. So I'm going to get a piece of paper for printing. I would invest in some decent printmaking paper if you're going to do this. This is masa paper. It's shiny on one side and dull on the other. The dull side is the side that'll accept the ink. So what I do is I put my plate in the middle of the target, and then I line up with these outside corners, just visually, and I exhale. Kind of touch the center down. So it's in contact with the plate now. Then you take a spoon and you just rub it around the plate on all areas, little circles. You want to keep one hand on the paper at all times to keep it from shifting while you're transferring the ink. Spoons have been used forever. I've been using it since college. I think they've been using them for centuries in Japan. But you can also get a baron, it's called. They're very nice glass pieces that you rub over the back of the paper. It just glides nicely and allows you to transfer a lot of pressure without damaging the paper. So in this case, I'm trying to make sure I get enough pressure on the black areas of the plate because I want all of the ink to transfer. I'd kind of like it to be very black here. So I'm rubbing it nice and hard. All right, I'm going to call that good. Pick that up. And there you go. There's my proof. You can see I have a little saltiness, they call it, when I didn't have quite enough ink transfer happening right here. I can either re-ink it a little bit differently, or I can make sure that I hit those areas with the spoon the next time. I have another method. Oh, by the way, I want to show you my where I put my prints when I hang them. I want them to dry. This is a metal shelf. Sorry about the noise. This is a metal shelf, and I have these little baby clothespins, and I can hang quite a few prints in sort of a small area. It's very useful that way. All right, I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna set up for the other method of printing. Be right back. Okay, I think we're ready for method 2. I've moved the target onto the floor. I've re-inked the plate. I have the target down there, and now I'm getting the same paper, masa. I like to use BFK Reeves, but I used it all up in a recent edition. So here's the paper. I'm going to do the same thing, line it up this way, and exhale. Put it down. Okay. This is a piece of batting, like if you're doing sewing or making a quilt, and I use that instead of felts. I mean, traditional printmaking, you use felts. And it's just to sort of protect the back of the print. This is a rocker board that I got to stand on when I'm working at my standing desk, so that I can have a little active movement while I'm working. It turns out that it's a pretty good press too. So I'm going to put it down on top of the whole thing, step on it. So I've got all my weight on it now, and I'm just kind of rocking back and forth right where the print is. And if you don't have a press, you got to do what you want to do. I mean, I've heard of people running over their prints with their cars, you know, putting it under their tire. I think that's a little excessive. Plus, it seems like you could really wreck something. But I don't mind standing on stuff. And I recently ran an edition of 45 prints for the Southwest Print Fiesta. It didn't have very much black on it, so we'll see how this one does. Yeah, it's a little salty. In this case, I would have probably wanted to take the spoon to it in some of these larger dark areas. But it's another way of doing printing, and I thought you would enjoy seeing it. So thanks for watching. Bye.